This is Cisco NetAcad Exercise 2.7.6 from the CCNA1 series, and it looks very similar to one we saw before, 2.5.5, but we're going to do a couple of extra things in this one. So let's get started. First of all, let's see what we're going to do. We're going to perform basic configuration on S1 and S2, but the difference here is that we're not going to get explicit instructions on how to do each step. It'll just say do it and expect you to know how to do it. Next, we're going to configure the PCs, which we have not done before, but we need to put IP addresses on these PCs. Next, we need to configure the switch management interface. What that is are IP addresses that we put on the switches in order to be able to contact them, test them, or perform telnet or SSH to them. Now, we're not going to do SSH or telnet, but we need to have an IP address in order to do those things in the future. So we're going to learn how to do that as well. Let's look at the background here. In this activity, you'll first create a basic switch configuration. Then you'll implement basic connectivity by configuring IP addresses on switches and PCs. That's what we have not done before. When the IP address configuration is complete, we'll use some show commands to verify configuration and the ping command to verify connectivity between the devices. All right, let's get started. In part 1, we'll do the basic configuration on S1 and S2, and we'll complete the following on both S1 and S2. So step 1, configure S1 with a host name. So let's click S1 here, get that up, and we need to put a host name on here. Now, how do we do that? I'm going to click the Enter key, and you can tell that I'm in user exec mode. You can tell that from this greater than sign there, but I need to be in privileged exec mode, so I'm going to type enable and hit enter, and now I'm in privileged exec mode. I also need to be in global config mode, so I'm going to type conf or conf for configure, and then a space, and then T for terminal, and I'll click enter, and now I'm in global config mode. Now I can do that host name command, host name, capital S1, and I'll click enter, and now I'm up to 4%. Now, in step 2, I'm going to configure the console and encrypted privileged exec mode passwords. So first, the console password. I want Cisco for the console password. First, I need to get into the configuration for the console line. So line con 0. There we go. And next, I just need to put the password on. Password Cisco. Now, the thing that everybody forgets, don't forget the login command, L-O-G-I-N. If you don't do that, it will never ask for that login, and you will not get credit in this percentage down here for it. All right, we have that done, and we are up to 13%. Now we need to do the privileged exec mode password, but don't be fooled here. While it says password, up here it's telling us an encrypted password. So we have to be careful about what we put here. First of all, let's exit to get back to global config mode. And now I'm just going to type enable, because this is the enable or privilege exec password. And I don't want the word password like this. If I do that, I will not get credit for it because it says up here encrypted. So I need to make sure that I use the word secret. And then the password is class. I'll click enter. I'm up to 18% now. Verify the password configuration for S1. Asks us how we can do that. I'll let you figure that out on your own. But now we need to use an appropriate banner text to warn unauthorized access. And here's a sample. It doesn't have to be this exact sample. It can be anything. But let's make sure that we put a banner on there. So in order to do that, we use banner MOTD, message of the day, and then a space, and then we have to start with some character. I'll start with the %, and I'll just type unauthorized access prohibited, like that, and I'll end it with this same symbol, the %, and click enter, and that is done. We're up to 22% now. Next, we need to save the configuration file to NVRAM. Right now, all of this is in RAM. So if I cut the power to the switch and then start it back up, none of this will be here. And I want it to be permanent on this switch. So I'm going to, first of all, I have to exit to get back to privilege exec mode. And then I can do copy, C-O-P-Y, copy, running, dash config, startup, dash config. Now this is the full command. However, since running config, the word run is the only command that could possibly mean running config, and start is the only could only mean startup config, because there's no other command that starts with the word start. So I don't have to have this whole thing. I'm just going to go back here and put run start, copy run start, like that. Now click enter, and it'll ask, do I really want to save it to destination file startup config? I'll click enter for yes, and that's done. I'm up to 27% now. Now it asks us to repeat all of those steps for S2. So let's go back up here to the top. Let's click S2 and bring that one up. I'll click enter, enable, configure terminal, and then host name, capital S2. All right, that was the host name. Now the console password, so line con 0, and I want password Cisco, and don't forget the login command, the one that's easy to forget because it doesn't tell you that anywhere. And then finally I want the enable secret password, so let's exit back to global config mode and enable secret class. There we go. We're up to 45% now. Next we're going to put on that banner. So banner MOTD. This time I'll use a $sign. Now I'm going to show you something here that you can do. I can just press enter at this point, and it'll ask me to put the text message in there, and it'll tell me I need to end with the character $sign. So I'll do that. Unauthorized access prohibited. And then it tells me to end with the $sign. I'll click enter, and there we go. And then I need to save this to NVRAM. So I'll exit back to privilege exec mode, and I'll just do copy, run, start. Hit enter again, and now I'm up to 54%. All right, so far, so good. Now we're going to configure the PCs. So PC1 and PC2, we need IP addresses. Click PC1 and then click the desktop tab. I'm going to click PC1 here. And this is the desktop tab. We have 3 tabs here available to us: desktop, programming, and attributes. So I want the desktop one. And then it says to choose the IP configuration here somewhere. You click IP configuration. So there we go. In the addressing table above, you can see the IP address for PC1 is 192.168.1.1, and the subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. Enter this information for PC1 in the IP configuration window. All right, let's put that in there, 192.168.1.1. And when I click the subnet mask, it will suggest a subnet mask, but be careful here. You always need to check and make sure it is correct, because we don't always want the suggested one. In this case, it is 255, 255, 255.0, 255, 255, 255.0. All right. That was that was PC1, right? Let's do PC2. There we go. Now, what is it for PC2? Well, let's learn how to use these charts up here. This just tells us, sometimes in the instructions, it won't tell you what addresses to use, whereas this chart will. So in this case, we want to make sure that we're on PC2, and it's 192.168.1.2. Again, 255, 255, 250. 192.168.1.2, 255, 255, 255, All right, very good. Let's go back down here and see if we can figure out where we left off. Repeat the steps for PC2. We just did that. Now we're going to test connectivity to the switches. Let's see if we can ping the switch 1 up here, which is 192.168.1.253 from PC1. All right, it says to click PC1, close the IP configuration window if it's still open. In order to do that, you would close it right here with this X. That gets you back to this desktop again. Don't forget, whenever you choose one of these, that X will get you back here. And now it wants us to choose the command prompt. And it asks us to do a ping 192.168.1.253. 192.168. What was it? 1.253. And we'll press enter and see if we can ping successfully. And so far it's not doing that. Now I will tell you that sometimes you have to redo the ping or wait for a couple of timeouts, and that has to do with everything connecting up internally. But in this case we're not getting any response, and so it appears that our ping is failing. I'm going to do it one more time using the up arrow on my keyboard, and let's try it one more time just to be sure. And the question here is, were you successful? And the answer is no. And then you can explain why you were unsuccessful. And in fact, I'll give you a clue on this one. Have you actually put this IP address on this one yet? No, you haven't. So that may well be the problem. All right, now we're going to configure the switch management interface. Sometimes it's called the SVI, or switch virtual interface. You'll see that in some of the documentation. But switch management interface or switch virtual interface, and we're going to do that right now. Configure S1 and S2 with IP addresses. Switches can be used as plug and play devices. This means they do not need to be configured for them to work. Switches forward information from one port to another based on MAC address. If this is the case, why would you configure it with an IP address? Well, it's for management purposes, I'll tell you that much. However, you should explain that in a little bit more detail than that. Use the following commands to configure S1 with an IP address. So we're going to go to S1. We will go to configure terminal. And then interface VLAN 1. All right, we're in config interface right now. Now we want this IP address, 192.168.1.253, 255, 255, 255.0 or /24. All right, IP address 192.168.1.253 space 255.255.255.0. Now be careful that you do this just as it shows right here in my example. I'm going to make that a little bit bigger so you can see it in one long line here. You need to be sure you put these in exactly like this. The 4 octets of the IP address, and then a space, and then the subnet mask. That's why in my classes, when we do the subnetting worksheets, I specifically take off points if you don't use this formatting for an IP address and subnet mask. All right, so let's close that up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and click enter. And now here's an important point. No shutdown. The no shutdown command, and by the way, you can now just call that no shut and that'll work. I'm going to click enter. No shut is how you start up an interface. There's no start, there's no startup, it's just no shutdown. And that's how you do that. And it says now that it's changed to up. Now let me tell you that all of the ports on a switch are already open. They're not shut down, except for the VLAN ports, the virtual ports, which we haven't talked about yet in the course. But if I were to show the running config here, you'll see that none of these ports say shutdown. But if I continue down here to the bottom, you'll see this VLAN does not say shutdown. But if I had not done that, I'm still in this, so I'm going to do shutdown. There we go. We've shut it down now. Let's take a look now again. This is the state you would find it in shutdown state. And this will not work if that's in shutdown state. And that's why we did that. Let's go back down here and do no shut and put it back to up. All right. Now we're going to go ahead and exit this mode so that we're back to global config mode. Here's a question. Why do you enter the no shutdown command? We just talked about that a little bit. Configure S2 with an IP address. So we're going to go to S2. We're going to do the same thing. First we need to get into conft and then interface VLAN 1 and now IP address. Well, what IP address are we going to use? For S2 we're going to use 192.168.1.254. 192.168.1.254, 255.255.255.0, and then no shut. There we go. Changed it to up. Let's go back down here again. Now we're going to save the configurations to NVRAM. So let's exit, copy, run, start. Let's do the same thing on S1 here. Exit, copy, run, start. There we go. Now we're going to verify network connectivity again. By the way, we are now at 100%. So we have officially done this entire lab, but let's check that connectivity again. Let's do the same thing we did before. Check PC1, click the command prompt, and ping the IP address for PC2, S1, and S2. So let's go to PC1, and now let's try to ping 192.168.1.253. That's this S1 address. Oh, not pint, but ping. Let me fix my spelling there, and we'll try that again. All right, we're just waiting now at this point, and request timed out. Oh, there we go. Now we're getting good pings. I'm going to repeat that. Sure enough, we're getting valid pings. Now, I know that this is, it's easier to read if it's all one line. There we go, like that. All right, good pings there. All right, now let's try from PC1 to S2. So ping 192.168.1.254. There it is, popping in there. The first one timed out. That's not unusual here in Packet Tracer, but it did kick in. If all four of them timed out, I would suggest just hitting the up arrow and re-pinging, and this time they should all take off. Now let's try pinging to PC2. So ping 192.168.1.2, and sure enough, there they are. They're all in place. And they're all running and working perfectly. All right, that finishes this lab up at 100%.